understand how the marketplace works and how to defend it. How, if we have if we have lawfulness in government, if we have an anarchy-free government, we will have more prosperity, more riches. We'll draw people from all around the country to move to Tennessee, where the laws are stable, the operation of the state, the operation of government is conservative, it is submissive to constitutional authority, and there is a culture, a sense in the air in Nashville and in state offices around the state that we are here to serve the people. We are here to protect their rights, to protect their property, to shield their lives from private evildoers, and even protect citizens of Tennessee from public evil by public servants. We're here to mind that everybody who works for state government or any organization that is authorized by the state to function, such as city corporations, that those people also respect the rights of common people who are the citizens, who are our sole focus of protection. We are here to protect them. We're not here to lord it over the people, to thieve our way ahead, to become sustainable by thieving from the people, by rejecting their rights and slighting their protections that are in the Constitution. If we honor those, this favorable state would say, if we honor those protections, we also will prosper along with our people. Running for governor this year is Senator May Beavers. She is a state senator, has been in the legislative branch for at least 15 years, and she is seeking to make her way among people like you, my listener here at Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and FM 92.7. She stands out in a couple ways. One is the paucity of cash flow that has come her way from all the Republican donors. They have gone with others. They've gone with Randy Boyd, who's pulled in from these Republican bigwigs, these establishment favoring conservatives, about $2.3 million, and Bill Lee, another wealthy businessman, he's pulled in $1.4 million in fundraising, according to a recent report, and given to himself another $1.5 million to boost his campaign. So these are very wealthy, you might say, establishment center-oriented candidates. And then May Beavers, who's fundraising by a recent report, has pulled in about under $40,000. The largest donor being a group you are familiar with, and that is the Tennessee Firearms Association. May, you are here on the radio, here on the phone, and are on the road today. What are your plans for the day? Where are you going, and whom do you plan to meet?
Well, we're going to McNairy County to speak to the McNairy County Republican women.
And what do you plan to tell them?
I plan to tell them what I'm telling everybody else in Tennessee, that they need to vote for somebody who not only says they're conservative, but who has the record to back it up. And that's what we're running on, because everybody in this campaign, they've got it printed on their literature. They're conservative. You have at least one other that is a Speaker of the House right now that's running, saying that, you know, she's helped shepherd through all the Second Amendment bills and things like that. But, you know, she was Speaker, and a lot of them got through despite her. But we've actually carried a lot of Second Amendment bills. We've carried 10th Amendment bills that they've had killed over in House subcommittees. Constitutional carry was killed in the House subcommittee, and so many good bills that we've tried to shepherd through the legislature. Somehow we managed to pass the Tennessee Firearms Freedom Act a few years ago that said that the feds had no control over ammunition or firearms or anything like that had to do with firearms that were manufactured in the state of Tennessee. So somehow we got that through the legislature, and we got a bill through actually before Obamacare passed that said that Tennesseans, if they were fined by the federal government for having or not having insurance, that our Attorney General would defend them. Now, what's interesting about that is we've had people in the state of Tennessee that have been fined, and, you know, they need to call the Attorney General and insist that he follow the law and that he defends them against the federal government. Ironically, that was the first bill that Governor Haslam signed into law after he became governor.
Well, let's just stop right there, May Beavers. This is David Tulis. Thanks for joining us. We're talking with Senator May Beavers. Now, this provision in the statute, May, I have not heard about. So you're saying that Governor Haslam signed a bill coming into office that says that if my listener is fined, if he files a tax return and is fined for not having so-called compulsory medical insurance, that the state of Tennessee will defend him if he elects to pursue a claim in tax court. Is that
right,
the dynamic?
Right. That's exactly. And we passed that bill in anticipation of Obamacare passing, because they were, it was being planned in Washington that they would pass the bill, as they, finally did. And so we passed that, and Governor Haslam signed that as his first piece of legislation that he signed into law.
Well, May, the big story here in coming out of Chattanooga this week, I'd say it's a statewide story, is the Tennessee Valley Authority, which encompasses all of our state, has authority in our statute in Title 38 to police the streets. And as I wrote, I have a story at Nooganomics.com about this provision. It's not just a loophole that lets these cops make transportation or traffic stops on Highway 153 and actually pursue people who are alleged offenders anywhere in the state. The statute says that he has this officer in my story has the power to make arrests for public offenses committed against TVA officials or employees, or committed upon, about, or against TVA property. And here's the part that I put in italic: or on public roads or rights of way passing through or over such property, and while in pursuit of a person fleeing after committing such an offense, may pursue the person and make an arrest anywhere in the state. So he has effectively granted by our legislature authority, in total authority to operate really anywhere on and enforce any law. That's what we have here by our leave. What do you make of this practice of TVA doing traffic enforcement?
I can't imagine if the legislature ever intended for them to make traffic stops for your tag being expired, or running a stop sign, or a red light, or anything else. I just can't imagine that was ever in their thoughts. So, when you've got really federal people enforcing state laws, there's just something inherently wrong there.
Well, it seems to me that would go against Officer Scott Stone's real goal, which is to protect the turbines, the dams, the electrical stations that surround here in Chattanooga, Chickamauga Dam. That's where the alleged offense occurred, apparently over the bridge, the state highway bridge that goes over the dam. The dam is federal property, and so he claimed justification for the traffic stop, a very routine, dreary cause. Because that car touched federal property. So this is the kind of thing that you've been fighting in the General Assembly, I would say.
I would say that something will probably come up on that this next year. We'll see, but that's why it's so important that legislation is worded just the right way. I've seen this so many times, especially with firearms legislation, Second Amendment legislation. The wording is everything. You can leave loopholes in the law that allows, people to get by with things that we don't intend them to get by with, or it puts restrictions on them that we didn't intend to restrict.
The Pew Trust, May Beavers, has a graphic that I reproduced recently that shows Tennessee gets about, more than a third of its revenues from Washington. Now, even if you are elected governor as a Constitution-minded and conservative, somewhat libertarian governor, there's not really a lot that you can do to reduce that take, is there? Because public opinion would seem to say, well, it would clamor against getting less. If we're paying out, many people voluntarily file tax returns and pay into the federal treasury, they're not going to tolerate any governor that says, well, we need to take less money from Washington and be more independent. There seems to me an impossible political resistance to the kind of thinking that you have. In other words, being more independent, being less dependent upon Washington.
Well, but I think you've got the picture. We have so much abuse of our welfare program, EBT cards, and things like that. We've even had to pass laws in Tennessee that said that you could not spend your EBT card money on alcohol and cabarets. It's unimaginable that was happening, but it was happening. But there are so many areas that we would restrict if we had the power to do it, but federal law prohibits us from doing it. And I disagree that we should, a lot of times it's matching money and things that come to Tennessee. And if we're spending it on things that we can cut back on, like our welfare program, like requiring work for welfare, like they did in Alabama, where they cut the rolls back 80-something%, then I think we're obligated to make sure that we cut back on welfare spending and therefore, money coming from Washington. I think there are some things that we can do to lower the percentage of our funds that we spend in Tennessee that come from the federal government by being sensible, making sure that our money is spent efficiently.
On the campaign trail, May Beavers, do you find a lot of support for police in cities and sheriff's departments around the state, or do you find growing resentment? And I would ask you, in light of a bill proposed by Gerald McCormick, the House Speaker, in the past session, a bill that gives blue special protections for men and women in blue, wherein if you are accused of hitting one of them or striking one of them, there's an extra penalty applied, kind of a respect the blue kind of legislation. It seems to me that the legislation should really go in the opposite direction, reducing the qualified immunity that officers have, and that would be in the direction of requiring every police officer to have an individual personal bond, say of $5 million, that he has to pay for himself, so that he can pay personally for the damage he wreaks upon people he beats or shoots or tases. What do you make of this? What is the campaign trail telling you about police support, May Beavers?
Well, it goes both ways. Sure, we have police that, do things that are wrong, and sure, we have the day and time that we're living in right now. The police are targets. And so we've got to do everything that we can to protect them while they're on the job, while still making sure that if they're out of line, that they're punished. So I think it's a fine line there. And, I'm finding a lot of support for law enforcement with what they're going through nowadays with, a lot of them being shot, killed for no reason at all. And so it's our day and time, and it's really a weird time, unlike we've seen in the past. And that's why I'm so concerned about our country, about our state, and what's going on. That's why we've got to have good leadership. And I think we have good leadership in President Trump. I think he's trying his best, and he's having to fight his way through it. And it may be the same way in Tennessee when you try to change things, from the top down. But we're certainly willing to try because there's a lot of changes that are needed.
Well, my listener is 7 or 10 times more likely to be killed by a police officer, May Beavers, than by a Muslim radical. And we have, even in the Chattanooga area, we've had remarkable cases of statutorily permitted extrajudicial summary executions by officers of citizens who have done nothing worthy of capital punishment. And I know this is more a legislative issue than one a governor would deal with directly, but it seems to me that we have almost 1,000 Americans killed per year by force of arms, by police departments, that there has to be some fundamental interest in reform. But conservatives, your constituents, seem to be very pro-police. But that's what I'm asking about. I'm pressing on this question. Do you have any reform impulse in you toward restricting the use of violence by the state against the citizenry, or are you all for the conservative position, which says we need to bash their brains in, and the cops need to have full authority to do what they need to do?
No, like I said, I think there's a very fine line there, where you've got to keep them in line, but you've also got to protect the citizens. And as governor, I think there is a lot that you could do. You can't propose legislation, but you can certainly have legislation as a part of your legislative package, as part of your budget, to try to push through the legislature, and that's usually carried by leadership. So I think the governor can have a lot of influence on what's going on in our state.
There was a lawsuit filed in January, May Beavers, that accuses state government and the legal system of trapping hundreds of, tens of thousands, I think about 140,000 people in judicial debt traps, which says that if they lose their driver's licenses within a year if they don't pay court fines and court costs. And the loss of a driver's license in the conventional thinking is equivalent to a civil death sentence, because without being able to drive or to travel by car or truck, you can't make a living, you can't support your family. So the state has tens of thousands of people under a civil death penalty. You were in the legislature when that law passed. Did you support it or did you oppose it?
I'm trying to think what that legislation was right now, and so I don't have any idea. I'll have to look that up.
Yes, ma'am. Well, it seemed that the story was in the Tennessean in January, and it pointed out that the poor are the most often the victim of the state's judicial industrial complex. They can't legally drive.
I did not support that legislation.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Now, what other things are you saying on the campaign trail, May Beavers? Why should my listeners take an interest in your efforts when the other candidates will have much more media presence than you will? How can you overcome the lack of donations to your campaign?
Well, and, you say lack of media presence. Things have changed. I think President Trump proved that when he ran, and we use social media a lot. We're going to be using social media a lot. Keep in mind that we had 3 weeks to raise that $40,000, so I thought we did pretty good in 3 weeks with no fundraising letters, no fundraising effort whatsoever. So we will have a new webpage going up this next week. We have hired professionals. We're going to raise as much money as we can to run, but we're not just going to give up because we don't have millions to put into the race, because I think that times have changed. And I think with Facebook and with social media and just people being fed up as they were with President Trump, I think that, they voted for him because they saw somebody that was speaking out. They saw a change and they were ready for it. And so I'm hoping that is the same at the state level. That we've seen businessmen in charge of the state now for all these years, and what did we get? We got tax increases. I've had people question the fact that we need a businessman and to elect a businessman as governor. And I say to that, I have business experience too. I'm the only one in the race that will have 2 years of law school. I've had a securities license. And so, if we want to talk about that, let's talk about, somebody that's actually had to go to the grocery store and know what things cost, that knows the cost of gas and what it's costing some of her constituency to just get to work from the rural areas. This gas increase is going to be a huge tax increase for them, more so than other people. So I think somebody with everyday common sense, conservative common sense, would be good for our state for a change. Now,
May, your website is what? Give it out a couple times so my listener can jot it down.
Okay, it's May, MAE, 4PN.com, and that's the number 4. That's MAE, 4PN.com.
May Beavers, a candidate for governor in the Republican primary. Thanks so much for chatting with us.
Thank you.
This is David Tulis. We've been chatting with, I'd say, the only genuine candidate for governor who has experience in the General Assembly and has a real record upon which to run. Though undergunned in cash, she's not undergunned at all in ideas and principles, as you can hear. And you'll note that she said she opposed the bill that would stiffen penalties and rigorously treat poor people in our state, of which there are tens of thousands, who have been given by state law a civil death sentence, a civil death penalty, being forbidden to go to and fro in their cars or trucks. Why? because they don't have the commercial driver's license that is presumably needed to move about. That is not exactly true. You can move about in car trucks privately, but this is, of course, the minority position. No lawyer would agree with it, but it is, in fact, the truth. And that's what we talk about here. David Tulis, I'd say May Beavers is a real party to consider and watch in the race for governor. Her website again is May410. That's MAE numeral 4 TN.com. MAE numeral 4 TN.com. David Tulis, and now economic development.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports